call the meeting to order. Will the recorder please call the roll?
Councilor Solsby? Councilor Savage?
Here.
Youth Representative? Councilor Fleck?
Here.
Councilor Stennett?
Here.
Councilor Irvin?
Here.
Councilor Roberts?
Here.
Mayor Gowan?
Here. Please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance.
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, the items to be added are proposed amendment to ordinance 3162. Can I get a motion on that?
So moved.
Second. Got a motion with a second. Is there any discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, so number 4 is appearance of interested citizens for items not on the agenda. This is a time for citizens to comment on items not listed on the agenda for a maximum of 30 minutes. Individual speakers must be recognized by presiding officer, provide their name and address, and will be allowed up to 5 minutes or less with council approval. Comments regarding any matter scheduled for public hearing may be provided only in that hearing. Comments on agenda items may be taken prior to council discussion on that item. Council will not engage in any discussion or make a decision based on public comments at this time. However, council may take the comments under advisement for discussion and action at a further council meeting. First one I have is Venice Mason. You're fine.
Yeah?
Oh, yeah.
My name is Dennis Mason, and I live in the Old City Hall building here downtown Cottage. And I wanted to thank the council for taking the time to hear me when I presented for Reading Out Hunger at our work session on homelessness. I came here this evening to really make a couple of points that I was unable to make there about community gardening, and have done some further research, and the information that I will be sharing this evening, it comes from, if you give me for a moment, the community gardens are strategies for sustainable community development and empowerment of homeless, an exploratory case study comparison. And what this study did is took a look at 2 well-established programs, one in the Bay Area and one in Santa Cruz, unfortunately both California. Roseburg doesn't have research out, even though they're doing a very similar program. It's much closer to home. I wish I had this kind of research for something that was a bit smaller and more rural like our community. However, there's really important points about homeless gardening. Both Fresh Start Farms in San Francisco and the Homeless Gardening Project in Santa Cruz have political, sociological sustainability at the core of their mission. And it helps with providing personal, social, economic, and technical assistance to communities who are attempting to address the myriad issues. Councilor Solsby, who's not there, has spoken about trimorbidity in the past, of addiction, homelessness, mental health issues, and it's really quad morbidity because you also have poverty, which is just insidious in these communities. So I'm here to speak about community gardens. We've heard so much about where homeless people can't be, where we don't want them to be. I'm really looking for a place that we want them to be, that they can be welcomed as members of our community, treated with dignity, and we begin addressing it. If we're not going to do a full-blown shelter immediately, taking positive steps towards working with these communities and allowing people to feed themselves, feed their community, and participate in a happy, healthy way here, I think we put a really good face on our community. I think tomatoes are something that most of us can agree on. Generally, folks on different sides of the political spectrum have strong values when it comes to taking care of their home. And I see left and right becoming the same thing. You go far enough left, far enough right, and you have the exact same people, angry and attached to their views in a way that doesn't allow them to work with anybody. I think that this is a middle ground. To be able to include community gardening as part of our plan to address homelessness in this community will lead to the beautification of our city, the treating of homeless people with dignity. It will help to achieve some food security for our own community, as well as provide functional, good role modeling for people who don't have a place to be for our day. Also, as to the previous proposal where it was the community about the homeless shelter site at the former church. I've spoken with people in those neighborhoods who literally live on the same street that are in support of that site for all types of activities. They're already dealing with the traffic to and from Mount David homeless camp, to and from community sharing, and other places. And they were in support of it. So I think that needs to explore further so that people have a chance to speak fully, not just from one side of the street. Something that I wanted to share with you regarding the homeless projects is what the study found. And what it found very clearly was that all independent variables corresponded with political and sociological sustainability. On a personal level, there was improved self-esteem and attitude towards the future and motivation, clearer personal goals for all people participating. Socially, they made new friends and had an ability to resolve conflict with coworkers and community members and increased communication capabilities. Economically, they achieved increased financial security, increased ability to secure housing. And technically, they have more plant knowledge, harvesting and compost skills, watering, greenhouse skills and delivery, business financing and negotiation, involvement in farmers market, flower arranging, etc. So take a look at those two case studies. I have the information that's available. We really have to do something because that's the heart of our community. No matter what, I probably share more values with people who perceive themselves as my enemies than they do. We have to do something, and we have to start somewhere. And I believe that having common ground and telling our homeless people where they can be, which is working towards a better future, telling them what they are, which is members of our community, will be the best thing for everybody. Thank you for hearing me.
Thank you.
And now.
Kathleen Matson.
Mayor, Mayor, Council, Ellis, and Councilwoman, Brittany. Yep, I live at 174 Bryan Avenue, and I lived here 18 years. I would like to bring up something I spoke at a previous meeting a while ago. When President Biden became president, he had the stacks of books in front of him to sign executive orders. I don't know how many was there, 25, 30, and it just kept on coming, days later, more and more. And the executive orders, it's sad because it doesn't give the people to have any say, or the congressmen or senators, just no one, the people can't speak. And then it started a domino effect where the progressive liberal states like Oregon, California, just went downward. And the governors started using their executive orders. And, Pete Brown is doing so and making these new laws to change our towns, our cities. And we don't have any say. We can't vote at all. And like you all don't have any say, Oh yeah, we can be a little bit a part of it, but you have no choice, and it's going to happen anyway. It's just so sad that our country is going downhill and being controlled. And years ago, when I was, participating and speaking out against the public schools and, looking at materials and everything, in those days, Norma Paulus was the superintendent of Oregon schools. And it was a new reform act. And it was all about re-socializing our kids. Re-socializing is socialism, and in the dictionary it says communism. And it's just dictatorship telling us what we have to do, and the progressive liberal agenda has just been going on real hard, real fast, you know, the past 2 years, changing everything. And it's just very sad. I want to share that. And thank you.
Thank you. Johanna Z.
I want to thank you again for allowing us to present last Monday in the first round to address the homeless situation. I wanted to offer a couple of reflections. We really debated whether or not to talk about this, but I thought it was important. So the speaker who presented after us took the opportunity to make disparaging comments for some time without interruption towards our group. You know, I don't think it's compassionate to allow her to go on as she did, making judgments and assumptions about who we are. It's not doing her any service. It doesn't help her grow. It only reflects poorly on her character. Strong leadership means providing clear boundaries. We're not affected personally, as we've seen this go unchecked on numerous occasions. But the more surprising part about that was that Mayor Gowering and Council Fleck, that you allowed this to go on as she did. It was a work session. We were presenting ideas. We weren't criticizing each other. We weren't here for that. We were just sharing our presentation. But it was only after another council spoke up that you actually proceeded, and she proceeded with another rant that we stopped her. So when working with people with addiction and mental health issues, boundaries are what can help them function in a healthy way in society. In moments of clarity, self-guilt and shame may arise when they're reflecting on their previous behaviors, causing further emotional issues. We know this is not who she is, and hold only the best intentions for full recovery, and we hope you guys do as well. So next, the comment came up that we don't have a concrete plan or a fully flushed out plan, and we totally agree. Our intention was to present a framework to show the possibilities of a strategy, not a proposal, that does not involve large amounts of government money and oversight, but one that includes the community and members that serve it. We also want to remain fluid and flexible as we move forward. So what's working, what's not. We continue to have people come forward looking to support this program in a variety of ways. We're super excited about and surprised all the people that have connected with us on this. We want to keep the lines of communication open. So we feel that, if the effort is for a government-run shelter, we might end up working against each other, and that wouldn't be productive. We absolutely love the idea of community gardens. One of our members is donating her produce to one of the churches who prepares meals. The concern, though, is a lot of people don't have to prepare their own meals. So I'd love to see that go forward with the kitchen, teaching people how to actually use the fresh organic produce. So lastly, from feedback from a couple of residents, we want to clarify what we mentioned in regard to compliance with Martin versus Boise. We had said that law enforcement would cite people for other violations such as littering, theft, or assault, as they have been doing recently. We've seen police blog and that people are actually maybe not specifically being cited for, but asked not to come back to a certain area or something. So this came out of the comments that we must absolutely have a shelter because otherwise we have no control over our parks because people cannot be cited for lying, sleeping, and sitting. So we do not believe the shelter management and outside agency with no investment in the people here is a good idea, and therefore made that comment simply to explain that we do not have to accept poor and often illegal behavior from anyone in our community because of this legislation. Our intention was not to offer a punitive solution to people trying to survive on the streets. Our strategy remains one of compassion and accountability. So we're already doing some outreach. Someone knows that I have an extensive medical background, and they asked me to go check on someone. And I did, and the person asked for some assistance in assessing some things about him. And I did, and was able to create a situation such that he probably avoided an ER visit. So it's just this networking that we're doing, that we're connecting already, and this is already happening
tiny little cubicles where the doctors and nurses and people go and they shoot up safely there. So they can monitor the dosage, make sure the drugs are clean, make sure they're not taking too much. And I'm just, this is considered harm reduction. And I mentioned this because Cottage Grove continues to advertise for harm reduction in this community. And I will wrap it up. Thank you. And we show videos on proper drug use and needle exchange. So I just say, please don't pass the buck on this. We can stop this. We can stop this as a council. You don't have to offer this and advertise this as a resource for people in our community. That's it. Thank you so much.
Thank you. And before you sit down, what agenda item do you want to talk on? You'd put it down, but you didn't put the number. LOC. Okay, thank you.
Mr. Mayor, we were told that they're having a hard time hearing the mic here at the podium.
Okay.
I don't know if there's
That's the last one until we get to the agenda item, so. Okay, there's no public hearings. It brings us to item 6, consent agenda.
Move approval.
Second. I have a motion with a second. Is there any discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Before we get on with item 7, I wanted to do this at the beginning of the meeting and it slipped my mind, but please keep the McIntyre family in your thoughts and prayers. Harry McIntyre is a longtime citizen. He's the one that is missing at Cottage Grove Lake. He's a good friend of mine. So it's going to be a loss to the community. Resolution ordinance. Item 7A, second vote for ordinance 3161, adopting overnight camping. Mr. Myers.
So you have before you ordinance number 3161 that was presented at the previous city council meeting to establish the overnight camping program. This is an option that the state legislature created under ORS 195-520 to authorize cities to be able to allow those individuals experiencing homelessness that live in their vehicles to be able to stay on public or private land if if the property owner allows that, and to allow that to be created and authorized through the city or local jurisdiction. You've reviewed this ordinance before. Friday morning, someone asked about having opportunities to evaluate the condition or functionability of the RVs or vehicles, and how would we address any concerns coming from those. I've provided you a copy of some of the nuisance ordinance provisions. Not all of them are listed there, and the highlighted yellow ones are the ones that would be typically we would use for that. In visiting with the city attorney today, we're very concerned if we try to get into any kind of setting standards for the vehicles. Number one, this ordinance is between the city and the property owner. We aren't doing anything between the city and the homeless individual that's living in the RVs, and so in the vehicles. And so if we do something where we're connecting with the individuals and their personal property as in RVs or vehicles, then we'd have to really make some changes. The other issue brings us back to our discussion that we had with the taxi cabs and the experience Eugene had with taxi cab licensing back in the late 80s, where their ordinance required a safety check that they had to do. A taxi was involved in an accident, and as a result of that accident, the brakes were apparently faulty, or some part of the car was faulty, and the city of Eugene ended up having a sizable liability as a result of those inspections either not being done or being done but then didn't work anyway. So the same thing would happen that if we had any kind of requirements saying, yeah, you have to have a smoke alarm, or you have to have this, or you have to have some kind of operational function with the vehicles. If something happened with one and they didn't, we would be liable. And so be cautious of doing anything like that. It's their personal property. The liability and responsibility stay and remain with those individuals who have that personal property. I think if you look at the yellow highlighted stuff from our nuisance ordinance, you can see that most of the issues that you can possibly think about with an RV or a vehicle in a driveway, we can address through one way or another using the nuisance ordinances. And so we'd suggest that we adopt the ordinance the way it is and use the nuisance ordinance to take care of any issues that apply. Remember, we did take out the timelines, so if a nuisance does occur, we can order that the people staying, camping on the property, leave immediately. There's no waiting period, there's no anything, there's no tie to any kind of requirement for giving a timeline. So we could ask that to end immediately and take care of it that way.
Councilor Irvin.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. When you mentioned that public and private, the public part hadn't come to mind in this discussion. I thought it was all surrounding private. So one question that comes from that is there what public property is there that's not owned or not managed or under the discretion of the city?
You got your school districts, fire district, county. So there's a number of other entities like that that would own property in the city, yeah, the state, yeah.
And if our intent was to leave it in with the public or with the private owners, is that prohibited by 195.520?
It comes directly out of 195, so out of the ORS. The ORS specifically says public and private. So we just pulled that right out to maintain the consistency with the state law.
Because the concern there would be to have some the public spaces turned into, I don't know how you would manage that you still have a restriction of 2
right
total. Do you know if that's distinct bounded properties or total property, or how that works?
There's other provisions for more transitional housing on properties as well. And when you get above the 2, it wouldn't be falling under the 195. It goes under, there's another ORS, so that allows and actually requires the local jurisdiction to approve a transitional housing project on land, and it deals with more than 2. So it's a larger facility, and it falls under a whole other set of rules. And I believe it's public and or private as well.
Do you know if this is restricted to if a property owner owns multiple properties? Is it per owner or per property?
It's per property.
Taxable.
Yeah.
Councilor Fleck.
Mr. Mayor, I move that the council hold the second vote on ordinance number 3161, adopting chapter 8.40 overnight camping program.
Second. I have a motion with a second. Is there any more discussion? Seeing none, will the recorder please call the roll?
Counselor Savage.
Aye.
Counselor Fleck.
Aye.
Counselor Stennett.
Aye.
Counselor Irvin.
Aye.
Counselor Roberts.
Aye.
Mayor Gowan.
Aye. So ordinance number 3161 is adopted. Brings us to item B, second vote for ordinance 3162, declaring a ban on psilocybin service centers and manufacturing. Mr. Myers.
And you had the item to be added. The attorneys provided a revised ordinance, and you'll see the changes in the resolution, in the exhibit in the resolution as well. Basically what they did was they found that they got the ordinances from the League of Oregon Cities, and they found that there was a typo in the reference to the ORS. They said in section 1 of the ordaining clause, they said 275 instead of 475. So that was corrected. In addition, the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 whereas in the recitals of the ordinance included language that was carried over from the sample ordinance that was setting the 2-year moratorium. And so the attorneys took that out, and that's the change you'll see in this 3162. And so if that's something that you want to accept those amendments, then we have to amend the ordinance and adopt it after with those amendments in.
Councilor Fleck.
So I assume this has been available for more than a week, so we can still do a second reading and have this adopted.
Right. Yeah. What the amendments and changes don't change. They're corrections. They don't change the intent of the ordinance.
As a second question, do I need to make the motion to hold the second reading as amended, or?
Yes.
Okay. Mr. Mayor, move that the council hold a second vote on ordinance number 3162 as amended, declaring a ban on psilocybin service centers and the manufacture of psilocybin products.
Second.
I have a motion with a second. Is there any discussion? Counselor Stennett?
Yeah, I can admit to being pretty confused by this. I see the reasoning behind banning something because it poses a threat or is against our values. I don't see the reason here. I don't think we've established that at all. I don't think we've discussed anything that proves it. Looks an awful lot like a solution in search of a problem to me. I mean, the only thing I can find in the ordinance that says, that gives a reason why we would ban it is the city of Cottage Grove is uncertain how the manufacturing, delivery, and administration of psilocybin will operate. It doesn't sound like a plausible reason to me. I think that as a precursor, as a required, I guess, precursor to referring it to the voters will necessarily sway those voters in advance of the election. I don't think you can say, we're going to ban this immediately without really discussing it, but you go ahead and have an objective viewpoint on it. Do your homework and see what you find out. And if the reason is because we don't know how the state is going to set up the system, I don't see us knowing that by the first week of November either. So I don't understand why. I mean, if someone could tell me why we're going to do this tonight, then I can be swayed, but I don't get it.
Counselor Fleck?
Well, if I remember all of the discussion we had last time, this also is in the rulemaking process where we won't effectively be impacting this, and so we can see how this rolls out in other communities. Mushrooms are definitely not the same thing as alcohol or marijuana. I was a young man and apparently inhaled. That was a terrible joke about Bill Clinton, but the reality is this is not the same thing, and I would rather be cautious about it. And I think that waiting, we can rescind this ordinance at any time. So if we see that there are rules proposed in other cities that work well, we certainly can rescind it and allow it to happen. But I think Mayor Gowing made a great comment about the old auto art property there, which just smells horribly. And if we'd have had a little more caution going into the marijuana siting, we might have been able to avoid some of those issues. So I would rather be careful. I'm not saying that I don't know. Science may prove that this is an effective use for folks with PTSD. I'm not suggesting that I'm against going down this road. I just want to be cautious. And I guess if that's, being harsh on the folks who want to do this, I think there'll be lots of opportunity states, and I don't think that we're going to negatively impact the advancement of that science.
Counselor Stennett?
I'm not sure why we would ban it if we can rescind it, if we would, instead of just wait to enact it when it proves a problem.
In my opinion, my understanding is if we don't, and they're grandfathered in, so this way we can prevent anything, and then we can allow it later if we need be. But once it's there no matter what we do. That's
but what is it?
What
is it? What's the problem? What's the issue? We don't know. We don't have a clue. The voters aren't going to either. And you're right, it is not the same as marijuana, but it is very similar in the fact that it has a very low, it's a very low chance and ability to abuse. It is not habit forming. Is the smell of that one grow a big deal? I don't see the parallel between that and growing mushrooms in an indoor facility, unless someone can tell me. And again, there's no guidance on why we should ban this. So,
Councilor Irvin?
Yeah, I think the reason why I'm in support of this particular move comes in the lack of parameters around the actual administering and the guidance of that, and the bounds of what that's going to look like, what the what maybe best practices are for the actual dispensing um, of that experience. And that was my understanding based on how the rule through the state was set up, and or how it's an order by statute that legalize it. And that we'll have ample time after the fact to maybe come up with our own rules that restrict where we can, if we're seeing that it's going off the negative effect in other cities that are doing it. But the fact that we wouldn't be able to have any stipulations or control of it leading up to it, if we didn't block it to start with, and as soon as, or what the day is that it goes into effect, January, but people could get licenses right then, and then we wouldn't be able to manage that situation. I mean, in general, there's not a lot to go on, admittedly, so I think this is a bit of a see what the people want, but.
Mr. Myers?
And I think some of the criteria or some of the reasoning is we're given certain windows to make decisions on whether or not we allow or when we can make decisions regarding the mushrooms. Under the ballot measure, cities can only do a moratorium or a ban at a general election. So you either do it at this one or you wait 2 years. The state hasn't adopted the rules yet. They haven't put together everything that how is this going to operate. So it's really difficult for the city or any city to create the time, place, and manner restrictions or regulations that we want to put in place because we don't know what the rules are that are going to be in place yet. By putting the ban in, if it passes at the vote, then you've given yourself as a city council a little bit of time that when the state rules get adopted, you've got some time to do and figure out and watch and see what other cities are doing. Maybe there's no problem. Maybe they've addressed everything and you can remove the ban and get rid of it and allow it to come in. Or maybe there are some problems and you see some things arise with other cities in the first few months of January, February. You can adopt your time, place, and manner restrictions and then remove the ban and you're prepared for it. I think that's how to line it out simply. You're in a hard spot because you don't know how the state, and they don't know yet how they're going to implement.
There's a third scenario, the voters could say it's okay.
And the voters could say that it's okay, and then you're back to the rules of the state when they come out.
Councilor Savage.
Thank you so much, Mr. Mayor. I know I don't disagree with you, Councilor Stennett. I think we obviously passed this in an election saying this is going to be okay. So why are we standing here saying, wait a minute, hold the brakes? I think of the new fancy thing that's coming to town. It's like, oh my gosh, there's so many kinks that need to be worked out that I would like somebody else to spend that time and energy working those kinks out. Let's just hold and watch and see how it unfolds. I think, Mr. Myers, you said it really well. Let's allow the state to come up with all of their regulations. Maybe it will be okay. Okay, so we didn't need this, but gosh, if we really do need this, it's better to have it to fall back on than it is to try and go, oh my gosh, now we've learned of all these new things and we can't restrict it while we're waiting. I feel very conservative in this, even though personally I feel like let's just give it a shot. Why not? You know, but I'm not here to vote personally. I'm here to think of the bigger picture. That's where I was feeling very conservative in that decision.
Councilor Stennett.
I think banning something that might be a problem someday is kind of terrifying. I mean, and I don't think, you can let other communities play this out, but Cottage Grove doesn't like other communities telling it what to do and how to operate. I think the solution would be a Cottage Grove one if there is a problem, but I don't see it. So, I don't see us ever being able to regulate the way it's run in the actual setting anyway. I also think if you're going to be cautious, then be cautious as regards alcohol, which is far more dangerous, far more costly to our community. We put liquor licenses on the consent agenda. We don't even discuss it. So, I mean, it's a definitely huge double standard. I won't take up any more time. Just deeply against this.
Okay.
Thank you.
Call the question. Will the recorder please call the roll?
Counselor Fleck,
Aye.
Counselor Stennett,
Nay.
Counselor Irvin,
Aye.
Counselor Roberts,
Aye.
Counselor Savage,
Aye.
Mayor Gowling.
Aye. So the second vote for ordinance 3162 passes. Brings us to item C, a resolution calling an election on November 8th, 2022 to refer to the voters. Mr. Myers?
So this resolution will create the election and put it on the general election with the other national and county and state things. And it actually creates a ballot title and explanatory statement that even though Lane County will not be publishing a voter's pamphlet, it'd be kind of nice to have that explanatory statement available. And so this resolution then takes the action from the ordinance and puts it into the ballot and places it on the ballot.
Resolution number?
2077.
Counselor Fleck?
Mr. Mayor, move that the council adopt resolution 2077.
Second.
I have a motion with a second. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, will the recorder please call the roll?
Counselor Stennett,
Aye.
Counselor Irvin,
Aye.
Counselor Roberts, Counselor Savage,
Aye.
Counselor Fleck,
Aye.
Mayor Gowling.
Aye. Resolution 2077 passes. Brings us to item 8, business from the City Council, 2023 League of Oregon City Legislative Priorities. Mr. Myers.
So you've received your packet of information of the 28 different items, possible policy issues from the League of Oregon Cities that have been created and fleshed out and talked with the different committees that the league has. The committees are made up of elected officials and appointed officials from various cities from around the state and the different sections or categories. The league is looking for the top 5 from each community that they'll then compile and use that for their major priorities that they'll work on. All 28, they don't have the staff or the ability or the means to be able to handle that through a legislative session. But the 5 they would then prioritize and work on. However, if any of the other items, as in years past, in sessions past, if one of the other items does appear on the agenda or in the discussions going on at the legislature, the league will take appropriate action and bring those and respond to those either in favor or help make some amendments or changes to those on the state process. But the 5 that they will get after compiling will be the ones that they will put into their major package to work on. So it's now for your opportunity to decide how you want to select 5 to submit to the league.
And Johanna signed up to talk on this.
So, so I didn't know a lot about this League of Oregon Cities. I'm not a politician, and the past year has found me diving deep into all of this. So I took a little look into who they are as an organization, what do they do, where they come from. You know, they've been around for about 100 years, and they are a government administrative organization, to my understanding. And it helps me to understand kind of what is happening when we have all these different rules being made and people are following different narratives. And I went through and I looked at their budget and I looked at, you know, what it takes to be a member of them. And not every city has to be a member of this League of Oregon Cities. But in order to be a member, you do need to be compliant with their ideas. And this latest, I think it was on the budget, that everything now is filtered through an equity lens. And we've talked about equity here before, and I don't feel it's very kind or it's a very radical narrative. So much of what I looked through here, as you guys look through, you know, beyond like taxing beer or marijuana, things like that, most of it has to do with issues that one might ask, is it really appropriate for a government to be involved in these social issues? So we come back to, is it right for this community? And I do want to back up and say, Councilor Stinnett, I do appreciate hearing. We need to hear the dissenting voice, or your perspective. We need to hear all perspectives so we can have a sense of consensus or understand where each other is coming from. And you said at the end, I don't want to take up any more time, but just want to say I think it's okay that we take up as much time, on any issue that needs to be taken up to discuss this. So as I looked, all the states have, belonged like to this National League of Cities, the national organization. So it's like, where do these ideas come from? Where does everything that you guys decide, what filter is it being used? So, they recommend all these things, right? They say you have to be compliant, and yet they will also protect you in court. They'll be a friend of the court in case you fall in their narrative and you're compliant with them. They will help you in case you're brought to court. So you have a backup, right? As long as you're following their narrative. And then, so they're following the Oregon, those following the national narrative, right? And then they're coming up with that. And then I ask, okay, well, where does that come from? So I think we're not really thinking for ourselves. We're not really being creative. It's almost like, John, you're a musician, you're a singer-songwriter. What if somebody said you just had to only use these three minor chords, and that's it, boom. You don't get much flexibility, not much creativity. You just have to be in this box. We saw the same thing with the homeless issue. There was so much attention going towards this one particular model, very well thought out, extensive model, but there wasn't until this breaking point that all of a sudden we started thinking of different ideas. And in that session, the mayor started talking about Serenity Lane and other ideas. You brought up another property, and this was great because all of a sudden we weren't fixated and rigid over here with this one idea. We just kind of opened up. So I'm just offering that as I go through and look and make all my notes, and I'm like, gosh, what about Cottage Grove and what's right for Cottage Grove? Why is it that, you're just kind of getting on board with everybody else's narrative? What would work here? And just offering that you don't have to be a member of them. You don't have to do what everybody tells you to do, right? You can, we can think and decide for ourselves. Even in some of the language, it said, what it said? It said the rural communities, well, they can't really think for themselves, so we need to help them. We need to bridge that gap between what we know in the cities, us educated folk. We need to tell the rural folks how to do things because they can't really do that and they don't have the resources to do it. So we're going to help them and pat on you on the back. And I just invite you to say, hey, you know what? We can do it ourselves. We can figure this out. We don't need to, follow the rule book of somebody else because it may not be aligned. I think we're just doing a lot of that these days. We're just following somebody else's rules without being discerning and saying, does this make sense to do this? But we're often just looking at the screen and listening to what the screen tells us, the device and the screen, the television, the news, and just taking it in as fact. And I'm just offering that other perspective. So thank you for hearing me.
Thanks. Okay, so it's the best thing just to go around the room and just give your five. So
yeah.
Council Roberts.
So just do it by the name?
Well, unless I did mine on the sheet. Yeah, just the number.
Yeah. Number's great.
I don't have the numbers.
Number 1 is number 2. Number 2 is number 8. Number 3 is number 16. Number 4 is number 13. And number 5 is number 12. Well,
Yep.
thank you.
Councilor Irvin.
A little fast.
I don't have the numbers, so I'll just read the titles. I guess I'd just state my understanding of what this is ahead of time. It's an organization. Part of what it's doing is picking certain pieces of legislation that are coming through in the next session and have a particular outcome they're looking to achieve. Those were stated in this packet. And our role here right now is to say which ones are the most important, which ones can we support. I will say that I had maybe 4 that I was like excited about, but since we have to have 5, I threw another one on there. So they're going to do this, and this is our chance to kind of sway and represent Cottage Grove in the small manner. So that's how I'm understanding this. My number 1 was community resiliency and wildfire planning. Number 2, infrastructure financing and resilience. 3, resilient, future-proof broadband infrastructure and planning investment funding for recovery of abandoned recreational vehicles. 4, marijuana taxes. 5, address measure 110 shortcomings. And then I do have a note, I know that you didn't ask for it, on item 3 for the recovery of abandoned vehicles. There's a lot of work being done by the off-road community in Oregon, in clubs, to go out and do this cleanup in the forest. There's groups PLC, I think, is one. Gambler 500, that's the whole thing, is to go clean up public lands. So I would just, if there's a way to note, people are already doing this, so if there want to be support, as with many things that people are passionate about, sometimes it's the people that rise up and do the thing because of the love for the land. So maybe there's a way to support them. But let me know if you missed any of those. And
Councilor Stennett.
Yeah, I apologize. This is the handout you gave us.
Yes.
I don't see any numbers, and I didn't do it that way. So
On the back of it on the agenda, there's a single page sheet that has
on the agenda.
On the packet of information. Yeah.
So I didn't. We were supposed to prioritize 1 through 5 as well.
It doesn't have to be
It doesn't count.
prioritized, just top 5.
Yeah,
Okay.
just your top 5.
My top 5. Resiliency and wildfire planning for sure. Both initiatives to address homelessness and the housing shortage. Property tax reform and digital equity and inclusion.
Councilor Fleck.
Yeah, I need to address the comments before I go into my numbers. So the league is effectively democracy. What we're doing right here is we're voting on what our priorities to have our lobbyists go to Salem and say, this is what's important to cities. These things are voted on in an annual conference. I mean, this is effectively what democracy is about. We absolutely have a say. Now, do we all agree? Clearly in Oregon, our cities are not all on the same page. So sometimes legislative priorities are built on what is best for most. And sometimes we have to drop ones that are controversial. But the league does so much for our city, including our health insurance for many of our workers, our liability insurance. I mean, this is, it's kind of like the Council of Governments where a bunch of jurisdictions to get together and they can save money by pooling resources and talents to actually do the good work of cities. So I just needed to address that because there's a lot of information that can be gleaned from the league, and I would definitely suggest that I can point you in those directions. So anyway, with that.
Before we get to yours, I'm missing one. We're missing one from you, Councilor Stennett. So can you go back over your 5 again?
So I did local funding to address homelessness,
Okay.
infrastructure to support housing.
Okay.
And that's
I've got those.
Resiliency and wildfire planning.
Okay.
Property tax.
Okay, that's the one I didn't.
And digital equity.
Okay. Great. Thanks. Now I have 15.
Okay, so I have number 1, or my first choice is number 2, local funding to address homelessness. My number 2 item is number 26, water utility rate fund assistance. My number 3 is number 28, which is infrastructure financing and resilience. My number 4 is number 23, road user fee, vehicle miles travel structure. My 5th choice is number 8, address measure 110 shortcomings. Yeah, I would have actually done the property tax one if it had had stuff like resetting on sale. The priorities they have listed here I can't support.
and they're a long stretch. But,
Counselor Counselor Savage. Oh,
On my, reset on sale. So even Prop 13 in California, when somebody sells their home, that property now resets to the market rate, from the assessed value. And so effectively, we have two houses right next to each other in Oregon that have the same actual value, yet one could be paying half the property tax of the other. It's not a fair system, and it's impacting the ability of jurisdictions to put services forth. So that would be one I definitely would want to see addressed. It's not listed in the priorities.
Counselor Savage.
Thank you so much, Mr. Mayor. So I think outside the box, and apparently I don't follow directions. Sorry about that. But what I did is I went through all of this, and I agree with the mayor. I don't see that any of these are bad, right? I could live with all of them. However, if we're supposed to pick the top 5, I compromised and I picked about 12. So I would be happy with any of these in any, there's no top or bottom, it just is, right? So I have in total random order, number 3, number 4, with a note wanting to talk with we've got local emergency response groups, as well as, what is that? We just went to the Armory, and some folks talked about climate change, and I'm kind of wondering if there's some sort of partnership to be had within that conversation. So that was my note to number 4. And then number 13, number 14, number 15, number 17, number 18, number 20, number 21, number 23, and number 24. But I'm okay with all of them. And I'm sorry, I think outside the box.
Okay, I got 2, 4, 19, 27, 28.
4, 19, 27, and 28.
Does that give you a 5 clear?
Well,
Please say yes.
We'll see. Number 2 has 4 votes. And then you have number 4 that has 3 votes plus 1 of 12. So we'll say that one has 4 also. Number 8, the address of 110 shortcomings, has 3. And then you also have infrastructure, number 28, that has 3. So we'll circle those right off. So you have number 2, number 4, number 8, and number 28 that have 3. There is also 3 on number 13 when we count one of the 12. And that's property tax reform, and that does it. Everybody else is 1 or 2.
So that's the last one's the 5th deciding?
Yeah.
Because I'm okay with supporting the number 8, the 110.
Yeah.
I'm okay with number 2 as well. That could be one of my 13.
Yeah. And I think your fellow colleagues from around the state, and I think we've even had some of the council in the past has been on the committees with the league and helped formulate these ideas and policy thoughts. I also want to correct some of the comments about what the league does. The league, we do not have to comply with anything from the league. The league does not set any regulations that cities have to follow. It is a voluntary organization that city leaders have formed back in 1926. And Cottage Grove was one of the founding groups as a part of that, to go to the legislature and to have a voice for cities and local government on issues that impact local government. And that is what this is all about. The league does a lot of other things to support those cities, support the rural communities, as well as help the metro areas. They have issues where metro areas on one side, rural communities are on the other, and it's a constant discussion between the leaders in those communities on how to address that. And we do not have to always follow the guidelines that come down for issues. And we have a former elected official from the city of Cottage Grove who was actually league president.
He has his hand up right now.
And I saw his hand up, and I think he wants the mayor to call him.
Go ahead, Mr. Boone.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just for the record, yeah, if anyone has any questions about the league, I was on the board for many years. I sat on many of the committees that put together the lists of things, just like the ones that are in front of you now. I am more than happy to hold forth at great length if necessary to answer all your questions and maybe put aside some misinformation. And that offer goes for both council members and members of the public. And I should say, once I'm back in the office, which should be later this week.
Thanks.
And I'll clarify where my recollection, my response comes as well, as I used to work for a league of cities in Arizona. And so I worked for the League of Arizona Cities and Towns. And there were only 82 cities in Arizona, and now there's 84 or 86. But I mean, that's what the leagues do around the state and around the country.
Well, the only thing I just wanted to add on that is the networking ability you come from working in the league, that you go to the conferences. Not only they have good training workshops for you, but you meet fellow counselors and mayors and everything from across the state. You develop friendships, which when you have an issue you want to talk to somebody, you can call and get, how do you deal with this in your city? How do you deal with this in yours? And you get, sometimes, you send out 6 different texts and you get 7 different responses. So it is valuable, and that kind of stuff is hard to come by.
So I'll go back over the numbers and the actual statements for you, so if there's any question on those. Number 2, the local funding to address homelessness. Number 4, community resiliency and wildfire planning. Number 8, to address Measure 110 shortcomings. Number 13, property tax reform. And number 28, infrastructure financing and resilience. So we'll turn those in.
Okay.
Great.
Good. Thanks. Concerns of council. Councilor Savage.
Thank you so much, Mr. Mayor. A couple different things. Being the city councilor that sits on the board of the Chamber of Commerce, I wanted to let everybody know that Shauna has given her notice, and her last day is, I believe, August 12th. And on that note, we were in a Concerts in the Park meeting today, and we decided that this Wednesday is just going to be too hot, so we have canceled this Wednesday's Concerts in the Park. We'll resume next week.
Councilor Fleck.
Yeah, I wanted to ask, I mean, we've had our lengthy discussions about different sites for a potential homeless shelter. We've had lots of discussions around, oh gosh, Boise Martin and all of the issues around that. We had a work session. As I was thinking about timelines, I would hope that we can come up with a decision before the fall. As I'm aware at this point, there are no funds to run a warming shelter from the county. So I had actually planned on not running that and do not have any funding to do that. So I personally would like to try to get this all resolved in time, that whatever project we do, we have time to actually put in that infrastructure. So I would like to see this on our next agenda to see if we can't move this forward. And I'll reiterate in public my offer to help anybody who has plans that are in structure but don't have the details. Because what we need is details. I really love some of the comments, that were brought forth. But we do have to do something, and we do have to have some action plans. And I'm actually pretty flexible to what those would be, but we do need to start cementing this in. And so my request is that we can, come together. I'm a little disappointed in some of the comments from all sides of the fence. I thought we actually showed great restraint in the last meeting by not really making points of order and shutting down negativity, which normally, as you all know, I'm pretty quick to do. That was actually an effort in trying to be a kinder and gentler counselor. So I apologize for that. We'll never do it again. I'm just joking. But anyway, let's keep working on this. I think we've made some real progress. I think we have some ideas. I think they need some meat. I think they need some substance, and I think we need to move forward. So that's my request.
Councilor Stennett.
I would, thank you. I'd agree wholeheartedly with Councilor Fleck. I would ask if it's amenable that we could maybe do the 22nd meeting instead of the 8th. I'm going back east to see family. I'll be getting into Portland at 5, and I don't think I'll make that meeting. So.
I won't be at the 22nd meeting.
We could do a different meeting, say the 15th as well. I'm available on all 3 of those days.
I'm okay on the 15th, it's not 22nd.
So giving it the evening?
The evening of the 15th.
Yeah.
So giving that agenda item the evening too.
Yeah,
I think it's a great idea.
Item. Yeah.
Let's do that.
Okay.
15th?
Yeah.
Okay. Councilor Urban.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Claire, you mentioned war main shelter in that statement. And as I was hearing it, I imagined that you were talking about a hybrid, like a dual purpose. Is that what you were conveying?
Yeah, my understanding is that Beds for Freezing Nights no longer has the volunteers to run a volunteer warming operation. This is what I've been getting feedback for. And so we were going to have conversations about community sharing taking over, some of those efforts. But as we've been talking through this process, it likely would be moot if we had an ongoing shelter 24/7, that we wouldn't necessarily have the need for a warming shelter, and or the availability of the pallet shelters. I had funding in the last 2 years from a program from the state called Out of the Cold funding. My understanding is that funding is no longer available. And so I just wanted to kind of mention that so that everybody knows we do not have a warming shelter solution at this point. And so I just wanted to kind of push this conversation to whatever resolution. I mean, we can certainly, but that starts November 1. And so the clock is ticking. If we're going to try to find funds or volunteers or whatever, that time clock is ticking. And so I'm not certain what we could put together, but we need to resolve this so that we can have that conversation.
And prior to COVID and the warming shelters, what was the location before? Was it
So Beds for Freezing Nights operated out of the Catholic Church and the Presbyterian Church, depending on availability. They did it in a congregate setting, so one big room for men and another for women with volunteers. And unfortunately, when COVID hit, they could not do the congregate setting anymore, which is what precipitated the need to do alternative type of warming shelter, which is where, our agency jumped in to do the pallet shelters. Like I said, it actually costs a lot of money to do that. I mean, labor and that is pretty expensive.
And the last question on that is, if they had volunteers, do you know if those spaces would be made available again? The previous ones?
I can't speak for either organization, I would assume, but that would be it. We'd need to basically work with BFN or our agency to figure that out.
Councilor Roberts.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mike, do you know if the Beds for Freezing Nights board is still active, or did they?
Mm-hmm.
They are still active.
Yeah, Pastor Marcus and
Okay.
Ruth.
So they're aware of your lack of fund or no funding possibly coming in.
I believe Ruth is their president right now, and we had a conversation, a long time ago, but didn't continue it because of the changes that were, possible. And so now that those are, more in question and or timing, I think it's good for us to have that in the back of our minds.
So if this fall and winter come in and we see a surge in COVID, because we're all forced back indoors, so there's still no funding going to be coming out of the county for this, as far as you know?
As far as I know, these things can change quickly, however. But at this point, my information is there is no out of the cold funds.
It'd be nice to see the community pull together along with this ordinance and get something going before that November 1st deadline, so we know, because we're dealing with two issues in a sense that are the same in a way. Thank you for letting us know that. Very much. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
So I'm glad Mr. Griswold's online tonight, because I want to give a kudos to him and his Public Works Department. Here a few weeks ago, a young couple that lives behind me, their sewer line runs down my driveway, and they have the city, or not the city, but the warranty service. And they've had so many claims that the warranty just told the plumbers to replace everything to their clean out. But they couldn't get the snake more than 90 feet down, which put it about even with my living room. And I said, these kids were just at wit's end. They've been living in a hotel for 3 weeks, and single income family. And so I said, just go down and talk to Mr. Stewart. Well, I beat him down to City Hall, and Mr. Griswold was in the office, and Mr. Stewart said, could you do something about it? By the time I got home, they had the vac truck out there, was snaking out their sewer line, ran it all the way to the city main. Last council meeting, when I got home, there was a flower and a priceless note or card, and it's a thank you written in crayon. Thank you for helping with our plumbing, Ariel. That's a really good thing for the community.
All right. I have one more thing. I want, once again, on behalf of Bohemian Mining Days, I want to thank Public Works and Richard Myers for all the help. That helped make that just a great success. Before the meeting tonight, I had a short chat with Chief Shepherd over Bohemian Mining Days weekend. One of the things I did as the marshal was I deputized a dog. We now have a Bohemia City canine dog. Walking around the park, we raised well over $200 to donate to the kennels in the name of Marco. So I'm going to be giving that money to the chief this week. So just want to let you know that.
Okay, so before we go into item 9A, we're going into executive session. So the City Council of Cottage Grove will now meet in executive session to consider information or records that are exempt by law from public inspection. The executive session will be held in pursuant of ORS 192.6602D, which allows council to meet in executive session to deliberate with persons designated by the governing body to carry on labor negotiations. Representatives of the news media and designated staff shall be allowed to attend the executive session. All other members of the audience are asked to leave the room. Representatives of the news media are specifically directed to not report on anything other than deliberating during executive session, except to state the general subject of session as previously announced. No decision be made in executive session. At the end of executive session, we will return to open session. Council may take action before adjourning the meeting.
So what we're going to do for the virtual part is we're going to turn off our microphones here and kind of shut down in the cameras so that we can have the discussion and it'll record on the recorder. Yeah.
Yes, thank you.
Yeah, go out.
Richard, do you want me to stay?
No. There's space here.
And which one do I shut for outside?
Yeah, I think it's off, but you can check and see. It should be the silver toggle switch.
Yes. Okay.
And we will turn off cameras.
We have to mute it over here.
Yeah. Did you mute and turn off the camera? Turn your camera back on. I don't want to unmute them.
Did you have something to do?
Okay, so we're at item 9A, approval and authorization of the city manager to enter a collective bargaining agreement with Labor's Local number 737 Labor's Unit. Mr. Myers.
So, we have completed negotiations with the labor's unit. As you remember, in the previous council meeting, we had an executive session where we kind of reached an impasse. We went back and they provided another proposal and we provided one back, essentially to try to avoid going to mediation. They have accepted our proposal, our counter proposal. Basically, we would be to go over the points that are in the new agreement. We've made some changes. We will notify them in 10 days of new hires. It had been previously 30 days. We made some corrections and some clarification of what floating holidays mean, that they total 40 hours. Since we do have some employees that work 10-hour days, we changed the work hours when shifts would occur between, we don't work them from 6 to 6, but it's the 8-hour shifts or 10-hour shifts can be inside that range to a 5 to 6, because we do have some employees that start extra early, and we do have projects that we actually want, like on today, or hot days, we want to start earlier and get some work done while it's cooler, since many of our jobs are outside and working in the heat. That gives us some opportunities there. The big issue is the wage increases and the compensation. Our proposal in this agreement that's been ratified by the unit is a 6.5% wage increase in the first year, which represents a COLA and an inflation adjustment. The COLA is 4.9, and the wage adjustment would then be about a 1.6% in the first year. The second year and third year of the collective bargaining agreement would then be the basic caps of 1.5 as a minimum and a 5% max on the CPI, on the COLA based on the CPIW for Pacific cities on the annual average of the 12 cities from January 1 through December. We also included some changes to the deferred comp for longevity pay, adding a 5th year, that on the 5th year they get a 1% deferred comp if they match it with a 1% of their own contribution. If they don't provide a match, then they don't get the 1% from the city. On year 10, they'd get a 1.5, and they'd get an extra 1% on that if they then matched the 2.5% total with their own contribution. In year 15, it's a 2% with an extra 1% if they match it with a 3% contribution. So let's say in year 15, they only continued contributing 1%, then they would only get the 2% from the city. They wouldn't get a 3% because we wouldn't be matching unless they matched our total contribution by 3. Then they'd get the extra 1. And year 20, they get a 25% deferred comp contribution with an extra 1% if they matched 3.5%. We adjusted some language in the general provisions to take care of recruitments or promotions when the current agreement says that when someone's evenly qualified, trying to decide somebody being evenly qualified is next to impossible to really figure out. We changed that language to say equivalent scores, because in handling any kind of evaluation of employees, we always score them, and so we'll use scores, and that helps clarify that language. It is a 3-year agreement, and we did change and added in our lead operator positions as well, so that they can do some of the paperwork that our operators can do in their absence, or if the operator doesn't have that specific certification. So the agreement is now open for the council to to ratify and authorize the city manager to sign the collective bargaining agreement with the laborers unit of the laborers local 737.
Councilor Fleck.
Mr. Mayor, I move that the council approve the collective bargaining agreement with the laborers local number 737 laborers unit, and authorize the city manager to enter into the agreement on behalf of the city.
Second.
Got a motion with a second. Is there any discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Report from the manager.
You have the little flyers on your desk for the symphony. It starts at 7:30 on Monday, and I'm going to look at the weather real quick because 88 on Monday. Cool. Because the violins will not play if the temperature is over 101. It is not good for violins, apparently. So we're looking forward to it. It should be an exciting concert. Again, there is a great lineup of music, and we'll be putting that information out shortly as well as they get it a little closer to what they're doing, and looking forward to that opportunity. So please share that information, pass it around, make sure everyone has an opportunity to hear and know that the symphony is coming on the 1st. It's a little later than normal as a result of the World Championships. They couldn't find a truck to haul their equipment. Nope, same conductor. Francesco's still here and doing that. We also have one of the Botswana athletes back in town. The World Championships ended. Most of the team was able to fly back to Botswana, or some of them went to Europe for some events there and some training there. He is going to Colombia for an event, and so his flight wouldn't leave until Wednesday, so he's staying in the community until Wednesday morning, and training and running in the mornings and afternoons at the track at the high school until he can get to leave. So it was interesting that he did call Shauna up and say, hey, please, can I come home and stay here with us? And he's also got one of the assistant coaches with him. So.
Did any of them win any medals?
No. The one that is coming back is one who was really projected to win. He did great in the qualifying race that got into the semifinals, but he stumbled at the start in the semifinals and didn't make the finals. He did the news, of course, they interview the person who loses. And how do you feel? What happened? He's 19 years old, and he had great wherewithal to say, hey, I'm inexperienced. This was what happens when you haven't done it as much as you really should. I'm looking forward to doing better, and sometimes you make mistakes, and I did. And he was totally upbeat about it. Really, really a great guy. A lot of character and everything with him. So I'm glad to have him back.
And I typically don't watch those, and because the Botswana was on it, I watched, and I've still got stuff recorded I haven't watched, but I wanted to try to see them. So I sat and watched the World Games, which I wasn't planning on it.
So
savage.
He stopped by the chamber office this afternoon, and we were visiting with him, and he kind of hung his head down. He says, I got 6th.
Yeah.
In the world.
Yeah.
6th in the world. It's incredible. What a wonderful group of young men and young women on that team. They're just absolutely incredible. We are so fortunate to have had them here and continue to have Leslie here.
And so hopefully if Eugene gets to do it again someday, and we'll get Botswana again. We did get recognition from Traveling County, did put out a special kind of commemoration or commendation to the city and to Shauna and the chamber. In their discussions with other communities and other teams, we just made it feel so special, I think, compared to what others did. Others, the team was there and they left, and they really didn't do anything to be a community piece, and that was exciting.
Nice.
That's all I have.
Okay, we're adjourned.